Every 24 hours, about 27,000 airliners take off and land. They carry over 1 million passengers and travel a daily distance of nearly 233 million miles. Our program concentrates on one takeoff and landing, with one aircraft covering just 236 miles between Amsterdam's Schipol airport and London's Heathrow. The Airways map designates this route Red 1.
The most distinctive buildings at any airport in the world are the control towers. Here at London's Heathrow Airport, it's 9 stories high, dominating the passenger terminals. But it's really only the tip of the iceberg for our story. If you've ever flown by air, you'll know that there's quite an army of people dedicated to getting you to your destination safely and on time. But behind every airport, every airline, every flight, there's a vast complex of air traffic control. And that's what I meant by the tip of the iceberg, because the tower is all that most people ever see of air traffic. Well, today, in one of the most ambitious outside broadcasts that we've ever mounted, we're going to take you behind the scenes and into that world of air traffic control, a world of quiet voices, glowing radar screens, and clipped radio messages. We'll also be showing you some of the work done in the airline's operations room, and of course we'll be hearing from the pilot of our plane. Well, to do this, we've chosen a typical flight from Schipol Airport in Amsterdam to here at Heathrow Airport in London. The journey lasts about 45 minutes, and our cameras will be eavesdropping on the flight all the way, so as it happens, you'll see it. It's a scheduled BEA service, answering to the call sign Beeline 515. The plane is a 600 miles an hour Trident, and the captain's name is Mike Channing. By the way, if you don't think 600 miles an hour is very fast, well, think of it like this. Think of 2 aircraft closing on each other at 600 miles an hour, and they're traveling faster than a bullet from a rifle. But I'm at the end of the story here, so let's go over now and join Shaw Taylor on the tarmac at Schipol Airport in Amsterdam, because that's really where Red 1 to London begins.
Thank you, Alan. Well, laid out before you is Schipol Airport, Amsterdam, one of the most modern of European airports. And sitting down there at Pier C41 is the BEA Trident, which is the centre of our story. Call sign Beeline 515. In about 7 minutes' time, Beeline 515 will be taxiing out, ready to take off and fly Red 1 to London. But in that 7 minutes, I have time to tell you something of the 3 parts of Dutch air traffic control who'll be looking after him between here and the midway point across the North Sea where London Control takes over. First and foremost, the ground control in that tower over there, where 515 will be asking permission to taxi out to the end of the runway, ready for takeoff. And then the Amsterdam Tower itself up there. And from there will come permission for the takeoff itself. Now, once 515 is airborne and the wheels are tucked up, they will tell him to contact Amsterdam radar. And they are the ones who will take him out across the North Sea along Red 1 to that halfway point where London radar takes over. And there at this moment is John Viner waiting to explain the next step.
Thank you, Shaw. And from that point halfway across the North Sea, the pilot of our flight, Beeline 515, will call the controllers in this room here at West Drayton to give them his height and his time at the boundary. The first controller here will take the aircraft along the airway Red 1 to cross the English coast at Burnham-on-Crouch. The second controller will bring the aircraft a little closer to London and at the same time telling him when to reduce height, while the third and final controller will take the aircraft to a point in the sky above Ongar in Essex. And from there, the aircraft will be handed over to Heathrow Approach.
Thank you, John. And the first time Beeline 515 calls the control tower at Heathrow, he'll be answered from this room on the 6th floor, Heathrow Approach. Sitting at these radar scopes are the directors who handle anything up to 1,000 aircraft a day. With so many aircraft, the distance from Ongar in Essex over central London to the runway threshold outside here is split between 3 directors. And with about 11 or 12 miles to go, the last director will hand him over to the Heathrow Tower, to the men who sit behind the dark green glass at the very top of the control tower.
As you can imagine, they have a marvellous and very necessary view of all the main runways, all the taxiways and the stands where the aircraft finally comes to a halt. Our flight 515 will be calling the tower controller, who will give the wind speed and direction, and we'll ask him to call at the outer marker. That's actually a radio navigation aid just before the runway. Today, using 28 left, the outer marker is one situated in a school playground in Isleworth. Even after he's landed, B-line 515 will be directed by another controller, Heathrow ground, along the right taxiway to his parking stand.
Well, I've just heard there's approximately 6 minutes before 515 begins his taxi out at Schipol. So, for the moment, let's join Bob Holness.
Well, we've now moved to Terminal 1 at Heathrow for another important part of the story, where the airline keeps a 24-hour watch on their aircraft. Now, in this room, known as Dispatch Control, BEA coordinate all their ground operations. And from here, they'll decide where to park the aircraft and alert all the ground service people to make sure no time is lost unloading passengers and freight, cleaning and refueling the aircraft, and getting it away on schedule. And up there, details of the current flow of aircraft in and out of the terminal. Now, in here, they've already calculated how much fuel our aircraft will need on the next flight after Amsterdam to London. Well, we'll be keeping a watching brief on the flight from the airline's point of view, but for now, back to John Viner at the London Air Traffic Control Centre.
You know, when you talk about flying in a controlled airspace in this country, and that includes almost everything except birds and small private aircraft, then you're talking about the responsibility of one man, Mr. Arnold Field, who's the Director of Civil Air Traffic Operations in the United Kingdom. Mr. Field, you've got a very complex and sophisticated air traffic control system here, but what exactly is air traffic control?
Well, simply explained, air traffic control is the safe, orderly and expeditious flow of air traffic. But to give you some idea of what that means, for example, we have about 2,500 aircraft movements a day through the London terminal area, and as Alan Hargraves mentioned earlier, at 600 miles an hour, that gives a closing speed of roughly 1,200 miles an hour, which is equivalent to the velocity of a bullet out of a rifle. So you see from that fact alone why it's necessary to separate one aircraft from the other.
Well, now with those 2,500 aircraft every day, how do you route them all over the country?
Well, we have a system of routes known as airways, which are 10 miles wide and can be likened to three-dimensional aerial motorways through the sky. And this model gives you some idea. And as you see, it's stepped down at the end, so the aircraft remains within controlled airspace throughout its descent into its particular aerodrome.
Yes.
And the routes which we have are shown on this map. For example, here is the main route going up towards Manchester and the north. And down here we have Red Airway 1, which carries the traffic going to and from Amsterdam, and which I believe is the subject of your program today.
Yes, it is indeed. Now, do you also look after military aircraft as well?
Yes, we're a combined civil-military organisation, and as you'll see on the sector later, there is a military controller whose task it is to radar direct aircraft across the airways system.
I see. But surely with all those aircraft on airways, one controller can't do more than look after a small piece of airway by himself?
That's perfectly correct, John. The area is sectorised, and for example, in your program later, you'll see that there is a team of controllers looking after each particular airway. It's a complex organisation, which will become clearer at a later stage, yes. I'm quite sure.
Now, what do you do if you have too many aircraft converging, say, at Heathrow at any one time?
Well, we have what we call stacks, and they're like aerial car parks, and there are 4 of them which serve the London terminal area, where we hold aircraft separated vertically by 1,000 feet, waiting their turn to land at the particular airport.
You put them in at the top, and Heathrow take them out at the bottom?
Yeah, exactly.
I see. Now, I suppose most of us are familiar with blips on a radar screen, but your radar's moved on several steps, I believe, now.
Yes, it has indeed. This is the commencement of a new system of air traffic control, taking advantage of advanced technology. And, for example, we use secondary radar, which is a means of interrogating an aircraft without bothering the pilot, from which we get back the identity of the aircraft and the height. This then appears on the radar controller's tube alongside the response of a particular aircraft.
Sounds fascinating. Thank you very much, Mr. Field. We're now going over to Amsterdam and Shaw Taylor, where B-line 515 is about to taxi out.
You're right. Fuel and catering are already on board. The passengers are in their seats. and Captain Mike Channing and his two co-pilots are in the cockpit, having filed their flight plan. They are now working their way through the 206 separate items that will be checked during this flight. Right, the door is closed, and Captain Mike Channing will now be asking permission from ground control to taxi out to the runway ready for takeoff. The finger pulls away and 515 is almost ready for the off. Now don't forget that, 515, because we'll be listening to RT, we'll be hearing quite a lot of call signs coming in from other aircraft, but you're bound to remember that one. Our one is that Trident, B-line 515, and you'll recognise the captain's voice, Mike Channing.
Clearance, Bravo 22 with uniform.
Roger, 515, clear to taxi out runway 24.
24, B-line 515.
The ground shows Javier 1339 Bravo, ready for start. Uniform. Is it 1339 calling? 1339 Bravo, sir. The other aircraft. Sorry. Ik heb er nog maar één op het ogenblik, 1339 alleen maar.
Well, she's away. There's not much time for social chat with the crew on a 40-minute flight, so I took the chance of having a word with Captain Channing before he went on board. And I asked him how busy he was going to be on the flight.
Well, our whole operating procedures are designed to avoid peaks in pilot workload, so that all our checks and drills are designed to spread the work evenly over the flight.
But you won't be physically flying the airplane yourself all the way, will you?
No, indeed, I shall be engaging the automatic pilot at about 400 feet or so after takeoff, and the automatic pilot will then remain engaged for the remainder of the flight, in fact, right down to touchdown on this flight.
Now, do you have control of the aircraft all the way, or do you hand over at any point?
Well, you may well, in the course of the flight, hear me on the intercom handing over control to my co-pilot, and I will brief him as to the state of the aircraft. I hand control over to him. That will leave me free to direct the flight and my crew and to generally manage the flight deck.
And will this flight be your full day's work?
No, in fact it won't. We brought the aircraft over this morning and then we are flying back to Heathrow and then going on to Belfast this evening.
B-line 515, go ahead, clearance.
Roger, 515, London 230, Falcon 60, Alpha 2136.
B-line 515 to London, level 230, a Falcon departure level 60, squawk Alpha 2131.
To squawk 2136, sir.
To squawk 2136, B-line 515.
That is correct, 515, Tower Alpha, 181, good day.
515, good day.
Uniform Alpha is cleared for takeoff, 23, report leaving Victor. Clear to takeoff, Uniform Alpha.
181. Okay, we'll just go through the Falcon departure, please. That's at the outer marker, SPL DME 5 miles. Turn right to intercept SPL radial 255 to Redfern South, and Falcon level 60. Okay, we'll display the Schipol 255 now.
How do you know when the aircraft is ready to leave the runway?
Well, before departure we calculate the weight of the aircraft. We take into account the surface conditions, the temperature, the wind, the state of the runway, and from that information we calculate the various reference speeds for that particular takeoff.
What are the reference speeds we might hear on the intercom?
Well, you will certainly hear the third pilot calling V1, which is the decision speed. Up to that speed I can stop should anything occur on that takeoff. After that speed I will continue the takeoff knowing that I can safely get airborne in the remaining distance.
So what's the next thing we would hear, next speed?
The next speed would be VR, which is the rotation speed, and that's the speed that I will rotate the aircraft into the flying attitude, and very shortly after that it will actually leave the runway.
Mike Channing, thank you very much.
Okay, we are about to turn up the runway.
To the buffer.
To the buffer, roger.
Down 515, ready?
B-line 515, ready in 1 minute.
Okay, cleared for takeoff and ready.
515.
We've got 102 plus 2. That checks.
Thank you.
Steward has reported. That's up to the line.
860 through the line. Flight recorder started, checked on, APU shut down, fireball isolation switch isolated, initiation switch is auto minutes, AC standby from flight. On the bus bar, checks complete. Takeoff controls checked. Controls checked, power. Stopwatches, brake pressure 0, gauges, takeoff power, relights nod, systems panel, all normal. 100 knots.
Give us tower, KLM 186 out of market inbound. 186, middle and 27, the wind is 280 at 12 o'clock.
B1.
280, 12 knots, and
BR.
Correct, for your information, the second high speed turn over. Roger, thank you very much.
Carriage up. Selected.
I've rushed across this darkened radar room because as soon as Amsterdam Tower have given 515 his airborne time, they will tell him to contact Amsterdam radar. And these are the chaps who will look after him from this point to a point halfway across the North Sea. Any moment now, 515 should be transmitting.
Amsterdam, B-line 515 is on a Falcon 60 departure.
B-line 515, Amsterdam, climb to level 220.
Great, we've picked him up. Now, Mr. Gerard Bakker here is Air Traffic Control Superintendent at Schipol. Mr. Bakker, I heard Mike Channing said he was on a Falcon 60 departure. What does that mean?
Well, a Falcon departure is a special departure from Amsterdam via area where Red 1 to London to collect it.
And the 60, of course, is 6,000 feet.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
he's going to fly out to start up. Now, how far has 515 got to go now? How far is it from Amsterdam to London?
230 miles. It's right down about here now.
So he's now on Red 1, is he?
That's correct. He joined the airway.
Maintain level 90.
Right, there's 515 on Red 1, on his way to London. So let's go back there to Bob Holness in the airline operations room.
Well, thanks, Shaw. Here with me is one of the duty superintendents, Eddie Powell. Eddie, how did you first know that 515 is airborne and on its way?
We have a teleprinter message, and in fact, Bob, you just come at the right time. It's here now, look. There you see, 515, Papa Hotel, Amsterdam, London, with 104 passengers.
What about the hieroglyphics down the side, all those letters? Take H, for instance. What do they mean?
H means unaccompanied minor, the name, and that information would be for passenger group.
So that message tells you all you need to know, does it?
Basically, yes. Some other things also, like ambulance requirements or wheelchair requirements. Anything out of the ordinary, in fact.
Well, this whole setup's out of the ordinary to me, particularly this television set here. Now, is this the thing you call FIND?
Yes, it is. That means Flight Information and Display. And the information is input on this keyboard here onto the screen.
Now, each one of these is a separate flight, is it?
That's right, yes.
What about 515? Is it there?
It's there. There we are. 515, schedule 1555, estimating on schedule 1555.
Now, as the aircraft gets closer to Heathrow, does that sort of stand out or something?
It does, yes, but at the moment, of course, the aircraft is some 35 minutes from touchdown, so you wouldn't see it on the screen. If you like, I can have it simulated for you on the scratch pad
can you?
there. Yes, of course. That.
Oh, and that's flashing now.
That's it,
Yeah. Now, who else sees this display apart from the other desks in the room?
That goes to all the airfield personnel who are interested on the arrival.
Thanks, Eddie, very much indeed. Well, now, we'll be coming back here as the plane gets closer to Heathrow. But right now, let's go across the North Sea to Shaw Taylor and find out how the flight's progressing under the Amsterdam radar.
Well, in the short while that you've been away, B-line 515 has moved from here across to here. He's climbing up now through 10,000 feet and accelerating as he gets up into the more rarefied air. Any moment now, he'll be in radio contact with London. But meanwhile, Gerard, how do the control centres stay in contact? I mean, you don't have to pick up a telephone and dial every time you want to talk to London or Brussels or something like that, do you?
No, we don't. We have direct telephone lines And radio links with adjacent centers.
So all you have to do is push a switch.
That's right.
Beeline 515 is now cleared to level 230.
Beeline 515 is recleared flight level 230. Beeline 515, cross the boundary, flight level 230. 515 to cross the boundary, level 230. Stood up.
Now, you've cleared Beeline 515 to 230, that's what, 23,000 feet?
Right.
Okay. Now, where will he be flying out? Along the red one there, but what are the other lines? Where's the coastline first?
This is the coastline. Airway red one to London. This is the boundary between Amsterdam and London.
And that will be the point where you will hand him over to London Control?
That's correct.
What happens? What are the dangers, Gerard, if he wanders out of that air lane?
Well, outside the airways, you've got restricted areas, danger areas, and a lot of military traffic flying outside the airway.
Now, this is him calling now, isn't it?
That's right.
Okay, Barry, 300 knots, steering 257. Set to car 230. You have control.
I have control, thank you.
Oh, that's the point that Mike Channing was making earlier on about how he would hand over the control of the aircraft to his, or his hand over the flying of the aircraft to his co-pilot. I noticed one thing, Gerard, that all the chat is going on in English. Is this universal?
Yeah, the aviation language is English. Whether they come in Greece or Scandinavian countries or Holland, everybody speaks English in aviation.
Now, he's getting very close now to the point where he'll be going over to the London Control. So let's pop over there for a few moments and meet John Viner.
Well, back here at the London Air Traffic Control Centre at West Drayton, I have with me one of the senior controllers, Rowley Charlesworth, and I'll be asking him a lot of questions as we go on. Now, there's a few minutes before the first call from our flight, Beeline 515, but the flight plan on that aircraft has already been received. Now, what sort of information does a flight plan tell you, Rowley?
Well, the flight plan contains information such as the aircraft's routing, the height he intends to fly at, the fuel state, the number of persons on board, the alternate airfield in case of diversion, things like that.
Rowley, I see there are already some handwritten figures on that flight progress strip. What does that mean?
Well, that is the aircraft's latest estimate and the actual height on the aircraft, which has been phoned through by Amsterdam shortly before this flight enters our sector.
So it's all bang up-to-date stuff?
That's right.
I see. Now, there are an awful lot of controllers sitting here, including one RAF controller. Who actually takes the first call from 515?
Well, this controller here will be taking the first call.
Uh-huh. And where will we first see him on the radar screen?
We should see the aircraft first coming up just about here.
And that's where? The FIR boundary?
That's the FIR boundary.
And the route of Red 1, the airway goes...
The route of Red 1 comes along from here through to Long Sands, then to south of Clacton-on-Sea at the coast, then along through to Ongar.
But the first controller doesn't look after him for the whole of that distance?
No, the first controller, his sector ends somewhere in the vicinity, approximately, of this Long Sand reporting point there.
Tell me, are there many other aircraft about this afternoon?
Well, there are one or two aircraft. We can see one ahead of 515 there, another one just ahead there.
Well, I see our flight is just about to make its last call to Amsterdam, so let's go back to Shaw Taylor.
Well, our Trident, as we can see, is coming very close now to the boundary line. He's left Amsterdam for, what, quarter of an hour now, and he's travelled about 100 miles. And he's almost reaching his top height of 23,000 feet. What's it like outside there, nearly just over 4 miles high? Well, I can tell you it's absolutely freezing, about minus 31 degrees centigrade. And if you can imagine what that's like, it's like standing on the top of Everest without your top coat on in a gale blowing at 600 miles an hour. But as I say, once he gets up to that 23,000 feet, that is about it. He starts his descent again. So at no point, really, is the aircraft going along on a level pitch. He goes all the way up, and then he starts to go down again as he approaches London. And that call could come any moment now because he's very close to the line. Now, what happens when we get his last call, Mr. Becker?
Well, after reaching flight level 230, as you say, 23,000 feet, we shall tell him to contact London, controller 129.6.
Great.
Amsterdam, Beeline 515, level 230.
Beeline 515, Roger, contact London Airways 129.6.
Gerard, thank you very much indeed. I found that absolutely fascinating.
You're welcome.
So we'll go straight to London.
London, Beeline 515, good afternoon. Flight level 230, estimating red first south, 27.
Roger 515, maintain flight level 230, squawk 1154, route Long Sands Ongar for 28 left.
Beeline 515,
flight level 230, squawking 1154, long sand on guard, 28 left.
Now that, Rowley, was 515's first call, and he said red for south. What's that?
Yes, that is the handover point between the Dutch authorities and ourselves.
What's the FIR part?
The FIR stands for the Flight Information Region.
Oh, I see. I see. And your controller then told him to squawk 1154. And what on earth does that mean?
Yes, that is the personal identification on this particular aircraft and appears as numbers on the radar too. The 11 signifies that the aircraft is inbound to Heathrow. The 54 part is the personal number on this particular aircraft. The next one will be 55 and so on.
I see. And the long sand Ongar for 28 left, what was that?
Well, that is the standard routing inbound today on this particular airway for the aircraft going into Heathrow.
Tell me, with these controllers watching blips all the time, is it difficult for them to remember that each blip is 100 or more people rushing through the sky at 600 miles an hour?
Well, no, these appear as blips on a tube here, but of course the controller is always aware of his responsibilities and the blips that signify aircraft with hundreds of passengers on board.
Beeline 515, you're clear to flight level 160.
Beeline 515, we cleared 160, we'll call leaving.
Roger 515.
Now that's the start of a nice gentle descent into Heathrow, is it?
That's right, yes, he starts now.
But tell me, the aircraft 515 seemed to spend so little time at 23,000 feet. Is it worth going that high?
Well, yes, it's a great saving in fuel, and of course, from the passenger's point of view, it's getting above most of the weather.
Captain Channing. We're flying at 23,000 feet this afternoon, and our speed is 600 miles an hour. In 5 minutes' time, we shall be crossing the English coast at Burnham on Crouch. We have Clacton to our right.
Yeah, the sort of conversation that every airline passenger is familiar with. Eddie, Captain Channing's what, 20 minutes away? Isn't it about time that you started thinking about the parking bay for the aircraft?
Yes, it is. About now, the ramp allocator, that man there, will decide where to put the aircraft.
Yeah, well, having decided that, how does he actually go about it?
He writes on the electrowriter, which he's now doing, and he'll put on there the 515 flight number, registration, Papa Hotel, and the stand number. That, in turn, will go to the tower, who will tell the captain where to go.
Do all the airlines do this?
No, at London, just BEA. Normally, the tower does this.
How important is this stand allocation, as you call it? That's the parking bays at the stand.
It's the stand, yes. Yeah. It's terribly important, in fact, because on this aircraft we have just a 33-minute turnaround. So it's really essential that all the ground services are there to meet the aircraft on arrival.
Yes, I see. I notice an assistant now is picking up the registration, PH registration, and he's going to put it on that plan, which is presumably a plan of this part of the airport.
That's right. You see, he's chosen Charlie 16 on Pier 3, which is quite near the terminal building. Yeah. And this will enable the passengers to walk off the aircraft.
Yeah, I see that. OK, fine. Well, now let's go back to London Air Traffic Control and see what's happening over there.
And back at West Drayton, what's going to happen next, Rowley?
Well, this controller here will be asking Beeline 515 to change frequency and to call this controller here as the aircraft moves from this sector onto this sector.
I see. Fine.
Beeline 515, contact landing control 127.905.
Beeline 515, good day.
So the pilot's been told to dial a new frequency, and he'll be making his call any second now. We'll listen for it.
London Control, Beeline 515, good afternoon. We'll be at Long Sand in 1 minute. We're leaving 230 for 160 this time.
Roger, Beeline 515.
Weather, sir.
Beeline 515, you're clear to flight level 140.
515, recleared flight level 140.
Rowley, just point out Long Sand again for me.
Yes, there's Long Sands.
Will the aircraft be preparing for a landing now?
Yes, just at the start of the initial approach phase, and up in the aircraft, the crew will begin.
Just a sec, Rowley, I think I can hear just that. Some chat about the auto.
Okay, Barry, we'll make this standard monitored approach for an auto land on 28 left. The standard procedures. Radio aids as discussed. On-guard red V. Oscar Echo red alpha. Epsom green alpha. And you're happy with the letdown on the ocean? Fine, okay. Up the top of descent goes, please.
Now let's go quickly back to BEA operations and hear a little bit more about that automatic landing that Captain Mike Channing will be making.
Captain Norman Royd, Flight Technical Manager, what does Autoland actually do?
It helps the pilot land in poor visibility when he can't see enough to do the job by himself.
Well, now, how does it work?
Well, first by manoeuvring the aeroplane onto a radio beam called the localizer, which is lined up with the runway. And as the aircraft approaches the edge of the beam, the autopilot computers demand a turn to the right so the aeroplane settles nicely onto the center.
Okay, we've got him settled on the center. What then?
Well, at 8 miles, the aircraft intercepts a second radio beam called the glide path. And this slopes upwards from the runway at an angle of 3 degrees. And this time the computers demand a nose down so that it descends on the glide path at about 13 feet per second.
Okay, now we've got him descending. What happens when he reaches almost down to the ground?
Well, at 70 feet, the throttles close automatically, and the autopilot reduces the rate of descent from 13 feet per second to about 2 feet per second just before touchdown. Otherwise, it would be a rather hard landing.
Yes, I can see that. Yes. How does the pilot actually know what's going on?
Chiefly by keeping an eye on an instrument which we call the situation display.
Well, this is a simplified diagram. Can you show us?
Yes, here's the aeroplane nicely settled on the localizer beam and in level flight coming up to intercept the glide path. And as he approaches the glide path, this bar comes down and shows it entering the middle of the beam. If it overshoots slightly, that's the sort of picture you will get, but then it will quickly recover to the middle.
Well, so much for the glide path. What if the aircraft should drift off the center line?
Well, if it drifts to the left, for example, the localizer bar will move to the right and show the aeroplane on the left-hand side. And the autopilot will then correct it and bring it back to the center line. And similarly, of course, if it drifts off to the right, the bar moves to the left, giving you a true picture of the aeroplane on the right-hand side.
So, in fact, we're seeing exactly what the pilot would see.
Exactly, yes.
Captain Norman Royd, thank you very much indeed.
Right, now, this is where the pressure really begins to build up on the pilot and on the controller, isn't it, Rowley?
Yes, on the captain and crew, but on the controllers, it's pretty uniform on all the sectors.
Beeline 515 is recleared now, flight level 130.
Beeline 515 is recleared, flight level 130.
Thank you, 515. Contact London now, 125.95.
595, Beeline 515.
What altitude is he coming down to now, Rowley?
13,000 feet.
Now that's 130 in your language, isn't
That's
it?
right. You'll hear a lot of that.
You knock off the last 2 noughts and then refer to it as 130.
Yes, we do.
I see. Is that him there that I can see?
Yes, if you look carefully, you'll see his height coming down. That's on the second row of figures.
And the last call from the controller here told him to call who?
12595. That's the next sector along there.
Well, we'd better get along there and listen to him call up.
We should hear the aircraft calling any moment now.
Good.
London Control, Beeline 515, good afternoon, is flight level 130, estimating Ongar 40.
Afternoon, Beeline 515, maintain your inbound Ongar heading, and you're clear flight level 70.
Beeline 515, recleared flight level 70, maintaining heading 270. Beeline 515 is out of 130. What speed would you like?
Keeping forward speed up for the moment, 515.
515, will do.
Is this the point when the aircraft may have to enter that aerial car park, the stack you were telling us about?
Yes, there are a lot of aircraft. This is where they enter the holding pattern so they can await their turn for landing at Heathrow.
I see. Now, Mike Channing asked, what forward speed would you like? Why was that?
Well, we have to adjust the speed on the aircraft so they can all be fitted into the landing sequence before landing at Heathrow.
Now, fairly soon, 515 will be leaving us. Who will he be working with next?
He's working Heathrow approach.
All right, well, let's go over to Alan Hargreaves for a preview at Heathrow.
Well, thank you, John. I've got Jeff Large with me here, one of the Heathrow supervisors, and I'll be asking him about that first call we're going to get from Beeline 515. We are the next line in the chain of air traffic control, aren't we?
That's correct, Alan. Yes, the aircraft is approaching Ongar, and we assume control from Ongar while the aircraft's on its approach until it has landed and parked on its stand.
In about a 30-mile radius, you've got control,
Yes,
haven't you? Are these 3 needed to bring in the plane, all these 3 controllers?
Yes, we need these 3 controllers. We have the approach controller here, who is responsible for the aircraft while it's in its holding stack, and also ensuring it has the correct landing runway information, weather information and surface runway conditions.
Yep.
We have the number 1 radar director who will use his radar to identify the aircraft, decide when it can leave the holding pattern and when it can be fitted into the approach sequence.
Yep.
In due course, he hands over to the number 2 director here, who completes the final part of the approach. His vital task is to ensure that the aircraft are correctly spaced, one behind each other, so that we can achieve the maximum landing rate possible.
Does controller and director mean anything different, or is it just a name for
No, it's
the
just a
same
different
thing?
function. They're all capable of undertaking each.
I see we've got a sort of similar kind of flight strip here that they had at West Drayton. Can we have a look at that?
Yes, we've received the advanced inbound release information on Beeline 515. We have his call sign, the type of aircraft, the time he is estimating, longer 1622, and 7,000 is the level to which the captain has been cleared to.
Well, I can see the strip. Can we see him on the radar yet?
Yes, we should see him now on this radar. Here he is, just approaching Ongar now.
Yeah. And that's where he is.
That's where he is.
All right, well, we're ready for his first call to Heathrow approach, but we'd better go back now to John Viner at West Drayton for his last call to London Control.
And as you've seen, Captain Channing and his crew and 104 passengers have been brought from a point halfway across the North Sea, travelling at 8 miles a minute, 23,000 feet up, and are now being gently brought down. The speed is being reduced, and very shortly, London Airways will be handing over the Trident to Heathrow.
Beeline 515, double check.
Beeline 515, passing 75.
Roger, maintain flight level 70, contact now, Heathrow approach, 119.2. Good day to you.
Good day.
Rowley, thank you very much for all your help. There's the call. Let's go back to Alan Hargreaves.
That looks like the Beeline 515 coming up to Ongar now, Rod. Do you want him to hold or come off?
I'll bring him off on 230.
Yeah, okay.
Heathrow approach, Beeline 515, good afternoon. It's flight level 70 coming over Ongar with X-ray.
Beeline 515, this is Heathrow approach. Report leaving Ongar heading 230.
Beeline 515 is leaving Ongar this time, heading 230.
Beeline 515, roger, descend to flight level 60. Report leaving 7.
Beeline 515 is recleared to 60.
Job going down.
Jeff, I heard coming over Ongar with X-ray. What does that mean?
This is a code which confirms that the pilot has received on a radio broadcast the latest weather report and landing information. The next report we shall broadcast will be Y or Yankee.
Beeline 515, reduced to 170 knots. You've got 26 miles to run. Beeline 515 is reducing to 170 knots, and we're out of 70 for 60.
Where is he now? Can we see him?
Yes, here he is.
I see. And is he reducing speed now?
Yes, he is reducing speed as instructed to 170 knots.
Which is what?
This is approximately 200 miles an hour. It makes our task easier if all the aircraft are flying at the same speed, and 170 is a suitable speed for all the types of aircraft that operate into this airport.
How many would there be flying around there with him now?
At the moment, there are 3 aircraft ahead of him, so he is number 4 in the traffic stream.
Yeah. So, in fact, you mentioned stacking before, but I take it he hasn't had to...
No, today the traffic conditions were such that he was able to come straight off Ongar without having to enter the hold.
Oh, really? And do we know exactly where he is now, over what part of London?
Yes, he will be approaching sort of the Hackney-Westminster area.
Thank you.
Beeline 515, reclear to 3,000 feet on the QNH 1022 millibars. Report leaving flight level 60. Beeline 515 is at 3,000, 1022. We're leaving 60 this time. Roger 515, you're number 4 in traffic, 22 miles to run. Contact director 120.4. 515, clear.
Now, the next call from our plane will come to this director, won't it?
That is correct.
You mentioned, though, that we were 4th in line. Does he ever break line for landing?
If the pilot declared a sudden emergency, we would have to give him immediate priority to land and rearrange the traffic ahead of him.
And then he'd be able to just come in?
That's right. Controllers must always be prepared for this.
Heathrow director, Beeline 515, good afternoon, is passing 5,500 for 3,000, heading 230.
Beeline 515, good afternoon. Continue as cleared.
Now, he's coming down to 3,000 feet. Where's that there?
That says there.
And what's heading 230 mean?
This means he's flying in a southwesterly direction, 230 degrees, 270 being due west.
Yeah. When do we tell the tower upstairs?
Director here will be phoning the air control any moment now to advise him that 515 is the next aircraft in the landing order.
Following Beeline 605,
And now they know, of course. Listen, what are those lines on there, up there?
These lines here are the extended centre lines for the runways, and this is the line that the aircraft will be flying down on his approach.
Well, bearing that in mind, let's listen into Captain Channing now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. We're beginning our approach to Heathrow now, and very shortly we shall be over the centre of London with the River Thames to our left and Hyde Park to our right. I hope you've enjoyed flying with us today.
63,
back with you. Heading 180?
Left onto 180, yeah. 1,000 per down.
Good, thank you. And the initial approach to please.
Roger. Ultimate start QNH cross check. Drip down indicated. Flaps 20 degrees indicated. Store recovery comparator. Tested in the green. Beeline 515, turn right heading 260. Cleared ILS approach runway 28 left. Range is 14 miles. The QFE 1019 millibars.
Beeline 515, turning on to 260 to establish 28 left, 1019 to QFE.
What's an ILS approach?
This is an abbreviation for the Instrument Landing System, which guides an aircraft down onto the runway in bad weather.
Oh, that's like the one we saw in the BEA ops
That's
earlier.
right.
Listen, do planes ever land just with visual aid, or is it always with instruments?
Very rarely today. Most pilots make an instrument approach irrespective of the weather conditions.
Yeah, they do. I've noticed you've got Beverly over there. I take it there's no sex discrimination in being an air traffic controller.
No, none at all. Beverly is the equal of any of her male colleagues.
And she's been through the same kind of training and everything like that?
Yes, we make no difference whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, I know that there's one more call that Beeline 515 has to make here, so we're going to leave our cameras down here while they make it, while we go up to the tower.
Beeline 515, established localizer.
Beeline 515, right near range 11 miles. You're 4 miles behind the Trident ahead. Call Heathrow Tower 118.2. Good day.
515, good day, thank you.
And the lady is These are two air traffic control systems who are responsible for processing outbound flight plans and for recording all our arrivals and departures on the aircraft log.
Looks exactly like a sort of map all laid up. We're very lucky we've got a fabulous day, but what happens if it's really cloudy and you can't see?
If the visibility is poor, we have fog, we have to control our aircraft by using the airfield ground radar, which incidentally, one we have here is the best in the world.
Yep.
Heathrow Tower, Beeline 515, good afternoon, is established 28 left.
515 Heathrow, report at the outer marker 28 left, the wind 280, 10 knots.
So, of course, now the plane's all lined up, isn't he? And he's been told to come onto the outer marker. What's that?
This is a radio beacon located approximately 4 miles from the end of the runway. As the pilot flies over it, he receives an audible and visual signal. This gives him a precise position report as to where he is on the approach, and also serves as a convenient reporting point for air traffic control.
And 280 at 10 knots is the wind direction that he's taking?
That is correct, yes.
Flight director off, relights not required. Auto land.
Yes.
Door to throttle. Engine anti-icings auto, landing lamps not required, SCS. Set for landing, 5 flags.
Mike Channing's now set the Trident to land by itself, and obviously there's an enormous amount of machinery and stuff like that in the plane. But how much is there on the ground?
Oh, a considerable amount. It requires a very highly sophisticated, complex and expensive electronic system on the ground to enable these automatic landings to be achieved.
Yeah.
Roger. Final roll, please.
Roger. Compass port, prime land. Airframe anti-switches are off. That's checks complete.
Beeline 515, outer marker, Fort Head end.
515, continue approach for 28 left. The wind is 290 at 10 knots.
515.
Yeah. Well, that's 515 at the outer marker in Isleworth. How soon will it be before we can see him through the glass here?
We should be getting visual contact with him any second now.
Yeah. Well, from up here, I can see the parallel runway system. They land on the left-hand one and they take off on the right-hand one, is that right?
We are at the moment. We have flexible use of these runways. Sometimes we reverse it. We'll take off on the left and land on the right.
And does this controller here, the one on the right, does he look after both the takeoffs and the landings?
Yes, at the moment he is,
Well,
under
why are
light
there
traffic
two?
conditions. This other controller is assisting him answering telephones. When it's very busy, we completely split the function, and one controller looks solely after departures and one will look solely after arrivals.
Okay, now what about the taxiing and the parking?
That is by the ground movement controller, who is responsible from seeing that the aircraft leaves the active runway until it is safely parked.
Beeline 515 is clear to land 28 left. The surface wind 280 at 12 knots. 515, thank you. .500 radio height.
I have control, auto land.
My throttles. Green light. Throttles closing.
818 Delta.
Air France H18, continue approach 28 left. The surface wind 290 at 12 knots.
Left on for reverse, yes. Reverse eyeball.
80 knots. Beeline 515, landed at 51. Cleared next right, call 1219.
Beeline 515, roger, good day.
Good day.
Well, it's fantastic watching a landing here, and even I can see that Beeline 515 made a perfect landing on Heathrow's runway 28 left. How fast was it going when he came down?
About 135 miles an hour.
That sounds a heck of a speed to go.
Oh no, this is quite a normal landing speed for this type of
It
aircraft.
is. Okay, fine. Well, the point is, I know he's got one more call to make, so I think we'll just listen to that. We've got back to the ground control.
Yeah.
Heathrow, ground Beeline 515, good afternoon, clearing 28 left.
101, entering the maintenance area. Oscar, roger, good day. Good day, and thank you. Beeline 515, you stand Charlie 16, a right turn on the outer.
Roger, Charlie 16 on the outer, Beeline 515.
What does all that business about right turn on the outer mean?
We have an outer and inner taxiway system linking the runways to the parking areas, and the controller wants him to go onto the outside or the outer taxiway because he has conflicting traffic on the inner taxiway.
Oh, I see. And Charlie 16?
Charlie 16, this is the apron Charlie, and the stand in that apron.
Oh. What happens at night in this sort of situation?
We can guide aircraft by a series of green lights, and these are controlled from this lighting panel here.
Yeah, and so, I mean, this is the vital thing at night, is it?
That's right, so the pilot just has to follow the green lights, and he'll go where we want him to go.
Just follow the green lights. Jeff, thanks a lot.
663, taxi clearance, please. 663, roger. Take the second turning left, northeast through 28 right.
Roger, 663.
Beeline 515, the camera crew are about 200 yards ahead, on the right, moving out in front of you.
Thank you very much, 515.
Descent ground, Air France 818.
Air France 818, good afternoon. Stand Echo 5 on the inner taxiway. Lufthansa 049, contact 1217. Seabird 651, give way to the Trident to come in ahead of you from the right, from the left side.
Roger, we give way to the Trident 651. Air Lingus 163, push back on 44.
Air Lingus 163, hold position, quiet.
Roger.
Amarok 663, give way to the 707 and follow him on the outer.
Roger, 663.
Foxtrot Mike, clearing block 101, thank you, sir. Roger.
609 for the stop tower.
609 affirmative, cleared across.
The only snag is this,
Beeline's forward, next speed. switch on the flight controller. Contact 157. Monitoring with starboard selected speed switch. Seabird 651, contact 157.
Well, our flight, Beeline 515, has landed. More than 100 people have travelled from Holland to Heathrow at speeds of 600 miles an hour, 4 miles above the surface of the Earth. But that's not really the end of the story, because already another similar flight has started. And so it goes on, an absolute 24-hour-a-day operation. Well, I hope that we've managed to show you some of the work done by the men and girls of air traffic control, by the men in the airline's operations room, and by the maintenance men who keep the planes in such perfect condition. In fact, I hope we've shown you some of the work done by all those people who made it possible for us to fly so smoothly, Red 1 to London.